right, opposed, fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Eat your little hearts out, mask lovers, because now you're going to get to wear them all day long in the comfort of your own home. Still think this whole thing isn't absolutely ridiculous? 2 days ago, Pennsylvania mandated that you must now wear your mask in your own private home when non-household members visit. That's right, no longer are you free to decide how you handle personal matters in the comfort of your own home. If this doesn't concern you, then maybe you will do just fine in what's about to become a communist country. Have our politicians completely lost their minds? Am I the only one in America who thinks this country is going a little bit cuckoo? You can't go to the bar unless you eat food. Apparently, Rona can't get you if you're having peanuts with a beer. You have to wear a mask to walk to your table, but as soon as you sit down, it's open game because I guess Rona can't attack below 5 feet. Wear a mask in between bites, be home by 10 p.m. now because coronavirus now attacks only after 10 p.m. But here's the godfather of stupidity when it comes to Rona rules. Wear a mask in your own home. When is this nonsense gonna end? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, people, but listen, I'm no doctor, but Rona's gonna get ya. It's a virus. At some point, you're gonna catch it. The good news, however, is that Rona's got a 99.8% survival rate, and seeing that we're not getting a vaccine until about early spring next year, for those of us who are ready, it might be time to start living our lives again and stop living in fear. Let's take a look at what the Pennsylvania residents think about the governor's new mask wearing at home mandate. The Pennsylvania Department of Health came out yesterday strengthening masking order. Masks are still required indoors. Masks now required anytime you're with people outside of your household, even if you're socially distant. Applies to all indoor facilities, plus if you have people in your home not part of your household. This is getting a little bit scary here. We've gone from wear a mask to protect yourself and others to you have to eat food along with drinking a beer, to you can wear a mask walking into a restaurant, but you can take it off when you sit down, to curfews at 10 p.m., to now wear a mask in your own home. If this isn't concerning many of you, then I don't know what's going to, because the rules keep getting stricter and stricter. They keep getting a little bit crazier by the day. And it's starting to get to the point where people are getting fed up. They're voicing their concerns. They're retaliating now more and more. And I don't blame them. These lockdown measures are out of control. And I'm going to prove to you all that they don't even work. We're going to take a look at a few different states in just a minute, and we're going to look at the population sizes versus the death count and how the Democratic states that are doing everything they can to lock down are still struggling and suffering more so than the relaxed Republican states. But first, let's take a look at what Pennsylvania residents have to say about the mandate in Pennsylvania. We'll scroll down to the comments cam here. Suzanne says, let's start with Kate. So I can meet up with my friends at a restaurant and we will all take our masks off to eat. but I can't serve them food in my own home because we have to mask the whole time. How does this make any logical sense? Close indoor dining and leave people's homes alone. Very true. This is a very hypocritical lockdown measure. Why, if you are so scared, state governors, if you are so worried about spreading coronavirus, why are you keeping restaurants open at all? Why are we putting in these half-assed measures of you can stay open, but you got to be closed by 10? That makes no sense. First of all, elderly people, immune-compromised people, they're not hanging out after 10 anyway. The only people who are hanging out after 10 o'clock are young adults, students, people who don't really pose that much of a risk. Don't pose that much of a risk at all to society. So if you're going to lock down, let's lock the whole thing down and stop being hypocritical here. Kate makes absolute sense, okay? It doesn't make sense that you're going to leave restaurants open where most of the infection spreads, but you're going to decide to now mandate how I wear masks in my own home. Let's scroll down and see what Dale has to say. Dale, you don't pay my bills, my rent, or my daughter's expenses. You have zero say in who I let in my home or what I should or shouldn't do in my home. I will only wear masks at work or while shopping. I will not wear one in my car or out in public if I'm socially distanced. Governors are preventing people from earning a living, yet they are providing no financial support whatsoever. None. Why is that? Why have we not come out with some sort of package yet to help people during these lockdowns? You keep telling people to stay home. You're taking away their right to work. You're offering no financial support. This is why governors and politicians are feeling the resistance. They're not providing anything in return. You can't just tell people to sit home, take away their earning potential, and then expect them not to have an issue with it. They're going to have an issue with it, and more people are voicing their concerns every single day now. Let's take a look at another comment here in the Keyboard Warrior comments cam. SF Dem for Freedom says, it is not proper for you to regulate what people do in their own home. You can make strong public health recommendations, but you overreach when you mandate how people can gather in their own homes and what they must wear when they do. Not okay. How are you even going to enforce a mandate like this? This reminds me a lot like my 10 years in China. Trust me, I know communism when I see it. I lived there. I observed it. Okay. China would come out with these laws that just made no sense. And we all knew there was no way the government was going to be able to enforce these laws, yet they just kept coming out with them, hoping that the people would just do as they told. Well, that's starting to happen here in America. The laws that were, well, no, they're not even laws. They're mandates, they're suggestions, they're recommendations. Okay, they're not even laws, and we're trying to understand how law enforcement is even going to enforce these ridiculous laws. This is what goes on in emerging market countries. This is what goes on in other countries, but not America. So it's very frustrating to see right now that they keep coming out with these rules that people don't have respect for because there's no way you're going to be able to enforce them. Let's scroll down to Michael. Michael Kirchner says, do we have to leave our masks on when we have sex with people outside by our current household? Fair comment. So what do we do now? When somebody comes in, okay, who doesn't live with us, do we need to wear a mask while having sex with a non-household member? It's a very good question. I'm not sure the governors have completely thought this one through, but the people deserve an answer. Scroll down a little bit more. We'll get through a couple comments, and then we'll head over to the COVID tracker, daily case tracker, to see how badly these states really are doing with their lockdown measures. Matt says, You are contradicting yourselves. We have been told by the experts that a mask will protect you from catching COVID-19. If that's the case, then there's no reason to social distance or to even quarantine. So it either protects you from it or it doesn't. Which one is it? And it is very contradicting. And I think this is why we have so many questions and why we are so frustrated. It's because we've been given contradicting information this entire time. If a mask works, why do we have to be socially distant? Why? It's if the mask works, then we don't need to remain 6 feet apart. We can go on with our lives, live our lives as normal, wear the mask. If the mask doesn't work, then what's this whole thing about anyway? So it's very contradicting. And the reason that we're so confused is because politicians, health officials have flip-flopped on the topic from day one. From the very first day, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Wait, now wear a mask when you do this, but you don't have to wear it when we do that. The whole thing is very contradicting and people are fed up. To Action 2 says, scroll down a little bit here, I do what I want in my home. Until you pay my bills, then you can tell me what to do. True. Again, what is with the dictatorship from some of these governors? Where do they get off thinking that they can constantly tell you what to do in your own private residence, especially after all they've taken away from the American people? It doesn't work like this. And I'm starting to question whether politicians really understand this. Okay, because it's just common sense. You can't go in people's homes telling them what to do. What law enforcement is going to seriously enforce this? Dan Doyle says, cowardly leaders will do cowardly things. Lockdowns and mask mandates don't work. Got a plan that keeps businesses running. We don't have leaders who know anything about leading and working with the people who need to provide for their families. So Dan makes a very good point. He's claiming that lockdowns and mask mandates don't work. So let's head over to the COVID cam, our COVID tracker cam, and see just how effective lockdowns really are. Right, so over the last 8 months, we've had a lot of Democratic states, New York State, California, now Pennsylvania, who have been on a very die-hard lockdown strategy, okay? These guys want it locked down. They want curfews in place, okay? California, as of now, lockdown, schools closed, 10 p.m. curfew. Let's take a look at what's going on or what's happened in California over the last 8 to 9 months with their lockdown measures. We take a look at California here, okay? California has had 18,299 deaths, population size of 39.5 million. The percentage of deaths to population is 0.04%. This is a state that has been locked down from day one. Very, very strict lockdown measures. 0.04% percentage of death to population. It's safe to assume lockdown is not the answer. Lockdowns are not going to make the virus go away. Let's take a look at Arizona. Arizona suggesting, Arizona Republican governor suggesting but not mandating any lockdowns at all. He has straight out come out and said it yesterday or a couple of days ago. I'm suggesting that we do our best, but there are no mandates in place. How has Arizona done over the last 8 to 10 months? We'll take a look at Arizona. Arizona, 6,312 deaths. Population size, 7.2 million. Percentage of deaths to population, 0.08%. No lockdown measures, no curfews, none of it. And they only have a 0.08% percentage of death to population. So we've got a Democratic state run by Democratic governor, okay, who's put the state on severe lockdown, and we still only have a 0.04% percentage of death to population. Okay, let's take a look at Florida. Florida's been a big one to focus on. Florida, the governor came out a couple of days and said straight up, we are not lockdowning at all. There will be no lockdown, business as usual, go out, live your life. Okay, it's not even a suggestion in Florida. And what's happened in Florida? Well, let's take a look. Okay, and Florida's a good one to compare against New York and California because the death count has been fairly similar, and so are the population sizes. Florida, no lockdown, no suggestions. Death count, 17,644. Okay, 17,644 deaths. Population size, 21.5 million. The percentage of death to population is 0.08%. The exact same as Arizona. 0.08% death record in Florida. Remember, California has a 0.04% death rate. Not far at all from each other. A state that's locked down substantially versus a state that's not locked down at all. Let's take a look at New York, because New York's been on the map. New York has been the catalyst, and Cuomo has basically written the playbook for the Democratic states to follow. Not looking well. Actually, New York State has done the absolute worst throughout this entire lockdown, which is why New York residents are so furious and frustrated right now with all the draconian measures that have been put in place. New York, total death count in New York State, the strictest state to lock down since the beginning of coronavirus. 33,693 deaths. Population size, 19.5 million. Percentage of deaths to population size has been 0.17%. 0.17% compared to Florida, who's done no lockdown at all, only has a 0.08% death rate. New York has doubled the percentage of death rate as Florida. It just goes to show how two states that can't sit further apart on the spectrum. Florida has half the death rate as New York. And Florida has some pretty populated and congested cities as well. So it's not like we can play the whole, well, New York City's very congested, so is Orlando, so is Miami. There's many cities in Florida that are very congested, and they still only have a 0.08% death rate. It's no wonder that the governor of Florida, Republican by the way, wants nothing to do with the lockdown. Texas, no lockdown order at all. Texas is also a very good one to compare. Texas has 19,696 deaths. Okay, population size in Texas, 29 million people. The percentage of deaths to population size, 0.06. 0.06. Okay. Florida, 0.08. Texas, 0.06. Again, it's no wonder that the Texas governor wants nothing to do with the lockdown. It's not substantial enough to warrant destroying the economy. The lockdown measures in New York State clearly have not worked. Cases are spiking again as we speak. Florida continues to live life, enjoy their time out at bars and restaurants and everything else that they're doing. Yet, New York can't seem to get a grip on it, even though we're telling everybody to stay indoors. The evidence is clear, and I'm not trying to undermine the severity of coronavirus. Yes, it's a very serious situation. There are many people out there that will die if they get it. No one's disputing that. No one's calling it, well, there are people who are calling it a hoax, but I am not. I'm not calling this thing a hoax. All I'm saying is that are lockdowns really working here? Is the strict mask mandate really preventing the spread or as drastically as they think it would? Okay, and the numbers are saying lockdowns aren't helping. They're not helping. Let's take a look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania just came out with very strict measures. Why suddenly has Pennsylvania come out? And what's interesting about Pennsylvania is we haven't seen too much of a lockdown measures, but all of a sudden their cases seem to be spiking. Pennsylvania has had 9,355 cases. Just to let you guys know, this is all from total deaths since January 21st, 2020, as of November 18th, as of yesterday. Okay, Pennsylvania, we take a look, 9,355 deaths, population size 12.8 million, percentage to population 0.0%. 0.0%. Florida, 0.08%. Texas, 0.06%. Pennsylvania splits two states that aren't locking down at all. Why is Pennsylvania going so hard on lockdown when Florida and Texas has already proven that lockdown measures aren't working? We're looking at the data. It's very clear. This is not even my opinion. The data, the evidence is showing that lockdowns don't work. They don't work. It's very clear. When we come back, we're going to hear what more Americans have to say about what governors across the country are saying about lockdowns and how we are all responding to them. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome back to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Welcome back to the show. Before we get into this next segment, before we talk about how the governors are responding across the state to reinstating safety precaution, I want to point something out real quick. And it's something that's very obvious and blatant, and it's frustrating to say the least, at least for those who sit on the right side of the fence here. Since Biden was unofficially and prematurely elected as the president-elect, the media has completely stopped trashing Trump for COVID cases. Have you guys noticed that? Have you noticed that since Biden has been elected president, and that's a big if, the media has completely stopped going after Trump for the amount of coronavirus cases that have spiked? For the last year, it's been Trump this, Trump that. Trump hasn't done enough. Trump's the reason for the cases. Now, all of a sudden, the ownership is on the governors. Well, the ownership has always been on the governors. It was the governor's responsibility from the very beginning of the coronavirus pandemic to do what they needed to do to protect the lives of their constituents. Donald Trump hasn't even been allowed to handle these states. He hasn't even been allowed to go into states when there were mass riots and help clean up unless the states asked him for their advice. If there's one thing that I've learned over this past year, it's that our president doesn't really have much say at all when it comes to how we govern each state. Yet He continued to get assaulted for it on a daily basis by the media. But now that there's a chance that he might not be the president for the next 4 years, the media have completely discontinued their attack on Trump. Now we're finally putting pressure on the governors for the first time. It should have always been that way. Let's head over to the keyboard warrior cam and we'll see what the governors have to say and what they're doing about the latest spike in cases. Governors throughout the country have reinstated safety precautions in recent weeks to try to combat the rapid spike in corona cases weeks before large family gatherings and holiday getaway trips are slated to take place. Governors imposed new coronavirus restrictions. What you need to know. Well, we already talked about the fact that Arizona is suggesting but not locking down. California is locking down hard. No school, 10 p.m. curfew. Again, lockdown has done nothing in California to curb the spread. Absolutely nothing compared to states like Florida, who have had open game, let people do and live their lives the way they want. Florida seems to be doing just fine. Same numbers as California. New York, lockdown, curfew. Schools are starting to shut down slowly across the state. New York City, de Blasio already said that schools are shut, even though the governor, Cuomo, has contradicted that yesterday. It's so out of control right now that they don't even know what's going on. They're not even talking to each other anymore. But de Blasio is saying schools are shut in New York City. Cuomo saying no, they're not. I don't even know where to start with that one. But the point is, it's a mess. It's a chaotic mess. But New York's on lockdown. Florida, no lockdown. Texas, no lockdown. Pennsylvania, lockdown, curfew, masks in home. Let's see what the keyboard warriors have to say about all of these outrageous and over-the-top, overreached Democratic-run state lockdowns. We'll take a look at what Susan has to say. Susan. It's all a bunch of BS just to control our lives. More and more people are losing their incomes and their mental health is waning. Fear of a virus that is 99% plus recovery rate. While 480,000 die yearly from cigarettes, including secondhand smoke, and nobody cares. It is insane, people. We must stand up for our human and religious and constitutional rights now. Tomorrow may be too late. I cannot be the only one, and I'm not, because there's millions of Americans who are also concerned with the direction this country is headed. And I really do think that some politicians are starting to wake up to it. I really do. I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think there are some that if they had it their way, would be going down a socialist agenda tomorrow. But I do think that a lot of, at least Republican sided states are starting to wake up to this and said, you know what? I think we've had enough now. We're going to put the brakes on this whole thing. And by God, we better hope to God that Georgia helps us keep the Senate, because that's going to be a huge, monumental shift to the very far left if we lose Georgia. Let's scroll down to see what Sonia has to say. Sonia, just lockdowns and mask mandates. How can we survive under these conditions with no job, no money, no stimulus, and no vaccine? It doesn't make sense. There's got to be something. If we don't have a vaccine yet, get the stimulus checks out. People are hurting. People are struggling. Parents are home trying to keep their jobs and teach their children at the same time. The whole thing is an absolute mess. No job, no money, no stimulus, no vaccine. Something has to give here. Something's got to give. No Thanksgiving and no Christmas. Congress, both parties are stalling on our stimulus relief. This is horrible. This is third world country. What is the effing holdup? Democrats and Republicans. And yes, both sides need to take responsibility for this. Both sides are to blame here. They are, because they can get together if they stopped for 2 seconds and started considering the American people above their own agendas. they could get a stimulus package together, because things aren't getting better. We're not getting a vaccine until next year, early spring, maybe. And that's if governors accept it. Because remember, our president has no control or authority over which states get the vaccine. So whether it's Trump or Biden, governors can still refuse this vaccine. There needs to be some sort of financial relief in place for the American people as this situation gets worse, but doing nothing can no longer be an option anymore. Let's scroll down and see what a few other people have to say about the outrageous lockdown measures that are occurring and that have been put in place more so in the last few days. Brian says, as we grind to a halt and cower in fear, the current numbers, science, suggest this is nuts. And he's right. Science does suggest this is absolute bonkers. Okay? In New York State, you get crucified for speaking out against the lockdown. You're called selfish, inconsiderate, because you're not respecting those who are vulnerable. In Florida, the vulnerable, the elderly, are saying, go do what you guys got to do. We're going to chill at home for the next few months or until we get a vaccine. It just goes to show the difference in political mindset between Republican-run states like Florida and Democratic-run states like New York. It just goes to show where the blame is. Republican states tend to take responsibility. Democratic states tend to ask for their free handout. That's the direction these states are both going. If you're between 50 and 69, you have a 99.5% chance of survival, and only if you are over 70 does the fatality rate approach anything near the level that we all feared in our early ignorance about the virus, which prompted the initial lockdowns. If you aren't elderly or physically wrecked, your survivability is even greater. Yeah, I know, if only one. We got to stop playing that, yeah, but one's too many. Even one is enough. Well, guys, listen, 69,000 people die of the flu every year. When have you ever worn a mask? In the last decade, 2 decades, however old you are, when have you ever worn a mask in the past? Every single winter. And I've said this before. I've been very vocal about this. I've said, listen, all of you mask-wearing hypocrites, you better still be wearing a mask every single winter from here on out for the rest of your life. Because my mom, who's almost 80, can die from the flu like that if you give it to her. So if I don't see you wearing a mask every single winter for the rest of your life, I'm calling you guys out on it. So don't give me this mask up, it's the right thing to do, when you haven't been masking up every winter your entire life. So we can't keep playing the whole, well, even if just one person dies from coronavirus, that's true enough. That's no way to be living our life. You can't live like that. We haven't lived like that for any other virus in the past. So why on earth are we now in such fear that we keep coming out with statements like this, that one's too many? Where were all you one's too many people for the last 50 years? It's time for a revolt for liberty and freedom throughout the states. I was in a conversation online, and you can see it on my Facebook newsfeed if you are friends with me on Facebook. I got in a conversation yesterday with a lot of people, and I told somebody, I said, I'm very scared, but also proud of the fight that the American people are about to partake in. I'm scared and proud at the same time. I'm scared because I don't know what's going to happen to this country. I feel like the election is being dragged on because both Republican and Democratic politicians are scared to death about what's going to happen. If Trump stays, there's going to be a massive outrage on the left. If Trump goes, there's going to be a massive resist on the right. Are we headed towards the next civil war? In our lifetime, at least my lifetime, I've never seen such hostility between two parties. And I feel like George is absolutely right. it might be time for a revolt. And it's a very scary and worrying time for many Americans out there right now. And we'll see what happens. Only time will tell. We'll end with one more. We'll scroll down to what Kathleen has to say. Kathleen says people need to wake up and pick their freedoms up off the floor. So while governors are telling us stay home, no holidays, then you have some governors going out to birthday parties and not doing what they are telling the people to do. Hello, I say have Thanksgiving and Christmas with your families and enjoy. What are they going to do? Throw us in jail? It's great to see that in upstate New York, at least in Erie County, state sheriffs have already come out and said, we're not enforcing this. We're not enforcing a maximum number of people at Thanksgiving. We're not doing it. I'm not telling my guys to go out there and break up your Thanksgiving dinners. And I'm so glad that they've publicly come out and announced that. It's very brave of them, but I'm glad they've done it. Because to rip families now apart from each other, you've already taken away our income. You've already suppressed our voices. You've already come up with enough draconian measures over the last few months, and now you want to rip families apart. What is going on here? This is getting out of control, and the local sheriffs are now fed up with it. How many people have to be fed up with these lockdown measures before Washington starts to listen? It's out of control now. It's too much. The people are fighting back. The people are resisting. Take care of each other. Protect each other. Do what you have to do to make sure you don't get anybody sick. Coronavirus is a real threat. We need to look out for each other. But lockdowns are not the answer. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today to You Made It Political. If you want to be a guest on the show, email guest@youmadeitpolitical.com. I'd love to have you on. We're going to start taking guests soon. Get out there. Enjoy your life. We've got some fun holidays coming. You never know. This just might be the last chance you have with your parents or your grandparents. Is that not worth more than the fear-mongering the media has rammed down our throats over the past year? That's it for today. You guys have a great, wonderful Thursday. We'll see you Saturday morning at noon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out youmadeitpolitical.com.